Maplewood was the kind of town people passed through on their way to somewhere else. It had one diner, one gas station, and a police department with more dust than officers. It was quiet, safe, and slow. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name and people left their doors unlocked at night. But all that changed the morning Clara Jennings was found dead. Clara was 45 years old, elegant, sharp-tongued, and known for marrying a man half her age, Ethan Jennings, a 25-year-old with deep brown eyes, a quiet demeanor, and a reputation for being too polite. People had whispered about their age gap, but Clara didn't care what people thought, and Ethan never said much at all. They lived in a beautiful two-story house on Birch Avenue with wide windows and a white fence. Inside that house was where everything had gone terribly wrong. On the morning of October 2nd, 2023, at 7:41 a.m., a 911 call came in from Ethan. His voice was shaky but calm. "My wife is dead. I think someone broke in." Officer Delaney arrived 9 minutes later. Clara Jennings was lying face down on the marble floor of the kitchen. Blood pooled around her head. Her skull had been crushed with a blunt object, a golden candle holder, which still lay beside her. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints except those of Ethan and Clara. Nothing stolen, nothing moved. The house was clean. Too clean. Detective Miles Carter was called in from the county. He was in his late 50s, graying at the temples, and had solved more murders than anyone else in the state. He had a nose for lies and a sharp memory. Miles believed in two things: people always hide something, and murder is never random. He arrived at the Jennings home by 10 a.m., ducked under the yellow tape, and entered the kitchen. His eyes didn't miss a thing. Ethan sat on the living room couch, eyes red, hands folded in his lap. He looked like a grieving husband, but Miles had seen better actors. "Tell me what happened," Miles said, his voice calm and firm. Ethan cleared his throat. "I woke up around 7. Clara wasn't in bed. I went downstairs, found her like that. I called you." "You didn't hear anything during the night?" Miles asked. "Number nothing," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Who else lives here?" Miles asked. "Her daughter, Camille. She's 21. She's at college. She lives in a dorm 2 hours away." Miles wrote that down. "You and Clara, how were things between you two?" Ethan paused. "We had arguments. Nothing serious." Miles looked at him longer than necessary. "Arguments about what?" "She thought I was too quiet. I thought she drank too much wine," Ethan said, managing a weak smile. A week ago, that would have been a funny thing to say. Now it sounded like motive. Miles left Ethan and walked through the house. Everything was in place. Upstairs, the bed was made, no clothes on the floor. Downstairs, the kitchen was spotless except for the blood. He looked closely at the candle holder. No gloves had been used. It had one set of clear prints. Ethan's. Later that day, the autopsy report came in. Time of death: between 5:30 and 6:30 a.m. Cause: blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Clara had died instantly. By the next morning, Camille had returned from college. Her face was pale, lips trembling. "She was all I had," she whispered. "Why would anyone do this?" Miles looked at her carefully. "When was the last time you saw your mother?" "Last weekend," she said. "I came home Saturday night, left Sunday afternoon. We had dinner. We talked." "Was Ethan there?" "Number, he said he needed to go visit a friend in town. He didn't come back until I left." "What do you think of Ethan?" Camille hesitated. "I never liked him. He was too distant, and he looked at her like she was a stranger sometimes. But she loved him." As Miles walked her to the door, Camille turned and said, "You don't think he did it, do you?" Miles didn't answer. He had learned long ago that the truth always leaks, usually through cracks people don't see. And this case already had cracks forming. Back at the station, Miles pulled Ethan's file. No criminal record. Grew up in Ohio. Moved to Maplewood 2 years ago after his father died. His father's name? Gregory Jennings. Cause of death? Heart attack. But something about that stood out. Miles checked the report. Gregory had died suddenly at home. His wife, long deceased. Only person present? Ethan. Miles leaned back in his chair. 2 deaths, 2 homes, 2 sudden tragedies. But no answers yet. He called the Ohio Police Department and requested the original file on Gregory's death. "Just want to double-check something," he told them. Then he circled a date on his notepad. September 10th, 2021. The day Gregory Jennings died. He scribbled a note under it. Was it really a heart attack? Detective Miles Carter sat in his office staring at the reopened case file from Ohio. Gregory Jennings, 63, found dead in his recliner on a Sunday afternoon. Autopsy listed heart failure as the cause of death. There was no toxicology test done. His son Ethan claimed Gregory had been complaining of chest pains earlier that week. But there was one detail that hadn't made it into the report back then. The coroner's assistant, a young man named Tim Hargrove, had written a personal note in the margin of the original draft. Red blotches on neck. Didn't look like heart failure. It was never followed up. The case had been closed in a day. Gregory was cremated 2 days later. Miles tapped his pen. Why would a 63-year-old with no history of heart problems suddenly drop dead, with red marks on his neck? It didn't sit right, and now, 2 years later, Gregory's son's wife is dead too. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. He picked up the phone and dialed Tim Hargrove. "You don't know me," Miles began, "but I'm looking into a case involving a man named Gregory Jennings. You did the initial intake." "I remember," Tim said quickly. Something felt off. The guy had bruising, red marks, but the coroner brushed it off, said it was stress. The son wanted a quick funeral. I always thought something wasn't right. Miles's gut tightened. 2 deaths, both sudden, both tied to Ethan Jennings. He drove back to the Jennings home that afternoon. Ethan had agreed to stay nearby during the investigation. He answered the door in a hoodie and jeans. His eyes looked more alert now. Too alert. "I just have a few more questions," Miles said calmly. Ethan stepped aside. In the kitchen, Miles took out his notebook. "Where were you on September 10th, 2021? Ethan blinked. "That's when my dad died." "Right," Miles said. "Where were you that day?" "Home. With him." "He collapsed in the living room. I called 911. Miles nodded. "And no one else was with you?" It was just us." Miles didn't say anything for a few seconds. "You know your father was cremated very fast, right?" Ethan stared at him. "That's what he wanted." Miles leaned forward. "I think you're hiding something, Ethan. But I don't think it's about your father. I think it's about your wife and your stepdaughter." Ethan's face went blank. "You and Camille didn't get along, did you?" Ethan didn't answer. Miles pressed. "Did she ever visit when your father was alive?" There was a pause. "Once." "What happened?" Ethan swallowed. "They argued. He didn't like her. He thought Clara spoiled her." Miles narrowed his eyes. "Did your father and Camille argue? Did anything unusual happen?" Another pause. "She was in the house the weekend he died," Ethan finally said. "But she left before it happened. Now they were getting somewhere." "Camille was 17 then, right?" Miles asked. "Yes. You said earlier she didn't live here anymore. Did she ever?" "Just for a few months," Ethan muttered. "Clara sent her to college early. Miles left not long after that, but now he had a new lead. Camille had been in the house the weekend Gregory died, and Clara had sent her away right after." "Why?" "He went back to the station and called the university. 'I need Camille Jennings's enrollment records,' he said. The registrar pulled them up. She had started early, very early, 2 weeks after her grandfather's death." Miles hung up and wrote down a theory. Theory 1. Gregory Jennings didn't die of natural causes. He was murdered. Theory 2. Camille was involved. Clara found out, sent her away. Theory 3. Ethan discovered the truth about Camille and killed Clara. That night he visited Clara's best friend, a woman named Dolores who lived 3 blocks away. She was in her 60s, kind-faced, and more observant than people gave her credit for. "Clara was worried lately," Dolores said. "She kept saying Ethan was acting strange, distant." "What about Camille?" Miles asked. Dolores sighed. "Camille had a rough year when she was 17. Something happened, and Clara wouldn't tell me. But she got her out of the house fast after Gregory died. Never brought her back. What do you think happened? Miles asked. Dolores looked at him. I think Camille did something terrible, and Clara kept it quiet. That was all Miles needed. The next day, he brought Camille in for questioning. They sat in a cold room, both hands on the table. Camille looked nervous. Camille, Miles said gently, I know you were there the weekend Gregory died. I know your mother sent you away right after. I need to know what happened. Tears welled in her eyes. He touched me, she whispered. Miles leaned forward. He tried to touch me. That night, I screamed. My mom was, upstairs. I ran. I didn't stop running. I told her the next day. She believed me. And then, Miles asked, she said she'd take care of it. But I swear I didn't kill him. I didn't. Miles believed her. But it didn't change the fact that something else had happened. He pulled out a photo of Gregory's autopsy notes. These marks, bruises on his neck. Did your mom ever say how he really died? Camille froze. She said he had a heart attack. Miles closed his folder. I think she killed him to protect you, and I think Ethan found out. Camille's mouth fell open. He wouldn't. He did, Miles said quietly. And he blamed her, not you. That's why he stayed quiet. That's why he waited. But when he snapped, he used the same kind of violence your mom used. Miles stood. Thank you, Camille. You've helped more than you know. Back at the station, Miles typed up his second case note. Clara killed Gregory to protect Camille. Ethan found out, snapped, murdered Clara. Case is turning personal. Ethan is more dangerous than he looks. It was raining in Maplewood the next morning. Thick, gray clouds hung low over the town, and the streets were wet with the kind of rain that made everything feel heavier. Detective Miles Carter sat in his office going over the timeline again. Clara had killed Gregory to protect Camille. She had kept that secret for 2 years. Ethan must have found out recently, maybe even just weeks ago. And when he did, he didn't confront her. He waited, and then, on a quiet October morning, he killed her. But if Miles wanted to make an arrest, he needed more than theory. He needed hard proof. First, he revisited the autopsy photos. Clara had been struck once in the back of the head. The angle suggested she hadn't seen it coming. She was standing at the counter. The coffee machine was still on. It was a morning routine interrupted by death. Miles revisited the crime scene with forensics officer Jenna Bell. She showed him something they hadn't paid close attention to before. Scratches on the edge of the kitchen counter. They're fresh, she said. The wood is splintered a little, like someone's hand slipped and they tried to catch themselves. Miles nodded. So Clara fell. Fast. She was reaching out for balance. What about fingerprints on the candle holder? He asked. Only Ethan's, she confirmed. No gloves, no smudges. Just his. That was damning. But Ethan lived there. His prints being on an object inside the house wasn't enough. Miles needed more. He met with the tech team next. Pull security footage from traffic cameras between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. near Birch Avenue, he ordered. See if anyone entered or left the street. 3 hours later, the team had results. Only one car had moved in that time. A black sedan, Ethan's car, pulling into the driveway at 6:11 a.m. Miles raised an eyebrow. I thought Ethan said he was home the whole time. He did, the technician said, but the camera says otherwise. Now the story was cracking. Miles called Ethan back in for a formal interview. The room was plain, cold, quiet, a place where truth usually surfaced. Ethan sat across from him, legs crossed, hands folded neatly. We found footage of your car, Miles said, sliding the photo across the table. You weren't home at 6 a.m. You arrived at 6:11. Ethan stared at the picture. I went out to get coffee. I didn't want to wake her. Came back and found her dead. Miles didn't react. Where's the coffee? Ethan blinked. I left it in the car. Miles leaned forward. We checked. There was no coffee in your car, no receipt in your pocket, no sign you bought anything. Try again. Silence. Ethan's jaw tensed. Miles opened a file. You said Clara argued with you a lot. You said she drank too much, but you didn't tell me what you found out about her past. Ethan's eyes flickered. What do you mean? Miles spoke slowly. You know Camille was in the house the weekend your father died. You know Clara sent her away right after. You know Clara killed your father. Ethan's hands clenched on the table. You found out, didn't you? No, Ethan said, voice low. I figured it out. My father's death never made sense. But then one night Clara got drunk. She said something. Called him a monster. Said she protected Camille. He looked up, eyes flat. And I knew. So you killed her. I didn't mean to, Ethan said quietly. I wanted to scare her. I wanted her to admit it. But she just looked at me and said she did what she had to do. Like she was proud of it. I just snapped. He looked down at his hands. It happened so fast. Miles didn't blink. You picked up the candle holder and you hit her. Yes, Miles stood. That's all I need. But Ethan wasn't done. Do you think I'm a monster? Miles turned slowly. I think you're a man who held rage in silence until it ate him alive. As officers came to escort Ethan away, Miles watched him go with a heavy heart. This wasn't a crime of greed or even jealousy. It was a chain reaction. One secret triggering another, each death rippling out from the last. That night, Miles typed his full report. Case title, Jennings Homicide Location. 112 Birch Avenue, Maplewood. Date of crime, October 2nd, 2023. Victim, Clara Jennings, 45. Suspect, Ethan Jennings, 25. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Weapon, golden candle holder, confirmed. Victim was struck from behind while preparing coffee. No signs of forced entry. House was secure. Only fingerprints on murder weapon were Ethan Jennings. Traffic camera footage places Ethan's car arriving at 6:11 a.m., contradicting his original statement. Motive confirmed during confession. Ethan discovered his wife Clara had murdered his father Gregory Jennings in 2021 to protect Camille, Clara's daughter, after Gregory attempted to assault her. Clara confessed indirectly during a drinking episode, according to Ethan's testimony. Ethan confronted Clara on October 2nd, intended to get a confession, and struck her in a fit of rage. Ethan Jennings acted alone. His motive was revenge, rooted in betrayal and unresolved trauma from his father's death. While Clara's actions were made in defense of her daughter, they were never brought to justice. And that justice was taken into Ethan's hands. Miles closed his laptop and leaned back. Another puzzle solved. Another family broken. But justice, no matter how tangled the story, had been served. 2 weeks had passed since Ethan's arrest. The town of Maplewood was still buzzing. The story of a son killing his wife after discovering she had killed his father was the kind of twisted tale that didn't come around often. But for Detective Miles Carter, the case didn't feel finished. Something still tugged at him. The reports were filed, the confession recorded, and Ethan was awaiting trial. Yet Miles couldn't shake the image of Camille Jennings during her interview. Pale, anxious, and too rehearsed. There was something in her eyes that didn't line up. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Control. So Miles decided to go back. Not to Ethan, to Camille. She was staying temporarily with her aunt in Cincinnati, trying to stay out of the public eye. Miles called ahead and scheduled a meeting. Camille agreed. He arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. The house was modest, tucked into a sleepy street lined with dogwoods. Camille opened the door herself. She wore a long sweater and jeans, hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked more composed now. I wasn't expecting to see you again, she said. I needed some clarity, Miles replied, stepping inside. They sat in the kitchen. Her aunt was out for the day. It was just the two of them. I want to revisit the day your grandfather died, Miles said. I think there's more you're not telling me. Camille stiffened slightly but said nothing. You said Gregory tried to assault you, that your mother handled it the next day. And then he died. You were sent away. That's right, she said softly. Miles pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Except I spoke to your old roommate at Wilbur College. She said you arrived 2 days earlier than school even opened. You were dropped off suddenly, alone, with no luggage. Camille didn't move. She said you cried in the bathroom for hours. Said you kept repeating, I didn't mean to. Still no movement. Miles leaned forward. Camille, did you kill Gregory? Camille's hands trembled slightly. I didn't mean to. Miles waited. He was drunk, she whispered. I thought he was going to. I was so scared. I pushed him. He tripped, hit his head on the fireplace. There was blood. I ran upstairs and told Mom. Miles didn't speak. She panicked. She checked his pulse, said he was gone, and then she told me to pack my things. She cleaned up the blood, called the ambulance an hour later, told them he collapsed. Miles nodded slowly. She covered it up to protect you, Camille nodded. She said no one would believe me, that I was just a girl, that people would think I wanted revenge or money or attention, and she never talked about it again. Number she made me promise to forget, and I tried, but I never did. Miles folded his hands. You understand this changes things. Camille's face was pale. You're going to arrest me? Maybe, Miles said, but first I need to verify your story. He left the house and made calls all afternoon. The original EMT who arrived at Gregory Jennings' house in 2021 was retired but reachable. His name was Ron Delaney. Miles met him at a diner off the highway. Jennings? Ron asked, sipping black coffee. Yeah, I remember. Weird call. Guy was cold by the time we got there. His son looked shaken up, but it was the wife, Clara. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Did you notice anything suspicious? Ron nodded. There was a faint blood trail by the fireplace. I mentioned it. She said he hit his head after falling, but the coroner said it was a heart attack, so we didn't dig. Miles wrote it all down. Then he spoke to the college again, pulled surveillance footage from 2 years ago. Blurry but clear enough to show Camille being dropped off, alone, middle of the night. No suitcase, just a backpack. Everything matched. By Friday morning, Miles had enough. He called the district attorney. She killed him, he said. Not Clara. Gregory died by Camille's hand. Clara covered it up. The DA sighed. You want to prosecute a young woman for pushing a drunk man who tried to assault her? I want the truth on record, Miles said. Ethan killed Clara thinking she was the murderer, but he was wrong. That truth should matter. The DA paused. Then let's put it all on the table. All of it. That afternoon, Miles visited Ethan in jail. I have something to tell you, he said through the glass. Ethan sat up. What? It wasn't Clara. Ethan frowned. It was Camille. She killed your father. Clara just covered it up. Ethan stared at him, mouth slightly open. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. She confessed, said she pushed him. He fell, hit his head. Clara found him and cleaned the scene. Ethan's jaw clenched. She lied to me. Clara made a mistake, Miles said. She thought she was protecting Camille, but she should have told the truth. Ethan leaned back slowly, broken. I killed the wrong person. Miles didn't say anything. What could he say? Justice in this case had no clean edges. New suspect, Camille Jennings. Crime, involuntary manslaughter. Death of Gregory Jennings. Motive, self-defense. Cover-up, Clara Jennings. Unauthorized disposal of evidence. False statements. Result, Gregory Jennings's death ruled as accidental but concealed. Camille wasn't arrested. The DA ruled it self-defense and Clara's cover-up as obstruction. But the truth was officially recorded, and now Ethan faced murder charges for a woman who died protecting someone else's secret. Miles closed the file, heavy-hearted. There were no real victories here, just a tangle of love, lies, and the cost of silence. Maplewoods Courthouse stood like a sentinel in the middle of town. Old stone, tall windows, and an American flag flapping over the arched doorway. The Jennings trial had become the town's main event. Reporters from outside counties gathered on the courthouse steps, whispering about the twisted story behind the headlines. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet tension. It wasn't just a murder case. It was a story of betrayal, hidden crimes, and grief twisted into rage. Ethan Jennings stood in the defendant's chair, dressed in a gray suit. His face was pale, hair neatly combed. He looked smaller than he had in the interrogation room, humbled, hollow. Detective Miles Carter sat near the front row, notebook in hand. He wasn't required to be there, but he needed to see this through. The prosecution opened with a simple, powerful line. Ethan Jennings killed his wife not in self-defense, but in silent revenge. They painted Ethan as a grieving son who held a secret in his heart for too long, until it broke. They showed the photo of the candle holder. They played the traffic cam footage. They read his confession. Then came the twist. The defense had their turn. Ethan Jennings was misled, said the lead attorney. He believed his wife murdered his father. She never corrected him. He acted on a belief rooted in a lie. They called Camille to the stand. She wore black slacks and a modest top, hair pulled back. Her voice was soft, shaking at times but clear. "I never meant to kill him," she said, referring to Gregory. "I pushed him. He fell. I thought he was going to hurt me. My mom, she cleaned it up because she didn't want my life to be ruined." The courtroom was silent. Camille wiped tears from her eyes. "She told me to never tell anyone, even Ethan, especially Ethan." "And when he found out?" the defense asked. I think, I think he believed it was her, and she didn't correct him." "Do you think she wanted to protect you again?" Camille nodded. "Yes." Miles could see the jury shifting in their seats. This wasn't a typical murder case. It was a family imploding under the weight of its own secrets. After Camille stepped down, the defense brought in a psychologist. Ethan Jennings was suffering from complicated grief and suppressed trauma, the expert said. He lost his father in mysterious circumstances. He found out the truth in pieces over time. When Clara indirectly confessed, it broke something in him. He wasn't thinking logically, but he still committed murder, didn't he? The prosecutor asked on cross. Yes, but his mental state was severely impaired. As the days passed, the trial became less about right and wrong and more about why Ethan did what he did. On the sixth day, the prosecution rested. Ethan was called to the stand. He hesitated. Then he stood up and walked forward. The courtroom was still. "I loved Clara," he began, voice shaking. "Even when we fought. Even when I knew something was wrong. But I also loved my dad. He wasn't perfect. He drank too much. He was strict. But he was my father." He paused, looked down. "When I found out he died and no one told me why, it ate me up. I kept thinking someone did something. And I was right. Just not in the way I thought." He looked up at the jury. "I didn't plan to kill Clara. That morning I just wanted her to say it, to say the words. But when she looked at me and said she did it to protect Camille, I lost control." He wiped his eyes. "And now I live every day knowing she didn't even do it." The courtroom was still. Outside, rain tapped lightly on the courthouse windows. Defendant, Ethan Jennings. Charge, second-degree murder. Defense, emotional disturbance. Lack of full knowledge. Evidence presented. Traffic camera placing Ethan at scene at 6:11 a.m. Fingerprints on murder weapon autopsy, confirming cause of death. Blunt force trauma, Ethan's full confession. Camille Jennings' testimony, admitting to Gregory's accidental death. Psychological evaluation, confirming impaired emotional judgment. The judge dismissed the jury on the 8th day. They returned 24 hours later. Verdict: guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Not second-degree murder, but not innocent either. The judge delivered the sentence. 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 8. There was no celebration, no joy. Just silence as Ethan was led away in cuffs, his head bowed. Camille watched from the back row, trembling. Miles stood beside the DA. "You think justice was served?" she asked him. He thought about it. About Clara, about Gregory, about the lies they told each other to keep the family from breaking, only to end up destroying it anyway. "No," Miles said finally, "but the truth came out. That's the closest we'll get." 6 months had passed since the trial. Winter had melted into spring, but Maplewood still wore a gray coat of silence around the Jennings case. People didn't talk about it much anymore. Not because they forgot, but because they didn't know what to say. Detective Miles Carter, however, hadn't moved on. Even after the confession, the verdict, the sentencing, something kept pulling him back. The whole case felt like a house built on soft ground. The foundation was shaky, Every layer of truth had exposed another lie underneath. And now, even with Ethan behind bars, Miles still had unanswered questions. So he went back to where it began. Gregory Jennings' house, now abandoned. The structure was being sold off by the bank. Clara had left it untouched after Gregory's death, and no one claimed it after hers. With the court's permission, Miles took one final walkthrough. A kind of ritual, closure maybe. The living room smelled like dust and old fabric. The fireplace was still there, the one where Camille said Gregory hit his head. Miles crouched beside it. The tile was cracked. It had been scrubbed clean, but something caught his eye. A hairline smear, barely visible. He took a swab. Then he turned to the shelf above the fireplace. Family photos, a glass sculpture, a brass key. A key that hadn't been listed in the original evidence logs. He picked it up. Small, marked BJ Basement Junction. There was no basement, was there? Miles moved through the hallway and found a hatch under the stairs. Locked. The brass key fit perfectly. It opened with a creak, revealing a narrow staircase. The air was cold and dry. At the bottom was a small storage room. Cardboard boxes, old trunks, dust-covered tools, and in the far corner, a locked cabinet. He forced it open. Inside, he found dozens of journals, all marked G.J. Gregory Jennings. Miles took the top 3 and brought them upstairs. They weren't diaries. They were records, financial transactions, meetings, even names. But not for business, for people. Young girls. A cold chill crept down Miles's spine. He flipped through one journal. It mentioned hotels, cash transfers, even photos. All coded, but not hard to decipher. Gregory had been trafficking minors, and Clara had known. In one entry, Gregory wrote, "See covered for me again. Said the girl's mother was unstable. Sent her away. I told her I'd cut her off if she didn't handle it." She did. Miles read on. One entry, just days before Gregory's death, stood out. "Camille's getting too old to stay quiet. She's asking questions. I need to decide what to do. C is scared, but she'll fall in line. She always does." He slammed the journal shut. So, that was it. Gregory wasn't just an abusive father, he was a predator. And Clara had protected him, again and again, until Camille got in the way. And when Camille defended herself and Gregory died, Clara didn't just cover it up out of fear, she covered it up to hide the rot. Ethan never knew any of this. He thought his mother was the villain for one death. He never realized she had allowed dozens of horrors to happen. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was a cover-up that spanned years. Miles turned the findings over to the district attorney immediately. A new investigation was launched. Camille was interviewed again. This time, not just as a survivor, but as a witness to a possible sex trafficking operation. She admitted she had vague memories. Gregory having meetings late at night. Strange girls crying in the living room. Clara always sending her to her room. She had been too young to understand then, but now it all made sense. The journals revealed enough names to contact several other survivors. Many were now adults, scattered across states. Some willing to speak, some too afraid. The Jennings case exploded again. Ethan's story was now part of a much larger scandal. Reporters swarmed Maplewood. Jennings' family cover-up became the new headline. The DA petitioned for a reduced sentence for Ethan based on the new context. The court scheduled a review hearing. And Camille? She left town quietly. Too much had happened. Too many ghosts. But before she did, she sent Miles a short letter. "Thank you for not giving up. I can breathe now, maybe for the first time in years." Camille new findings. Gregory Jennings operated a trafficking ring from 2015 to 2021. Clara Jennings assisted in suppressing reports and threatening victims' families. Camille Jennings, likely a key survivor, witness, with early exposure to abuse. Clara's motive for covering up Gregory's death now understood to be preservation of criminal secrets, not protection alone. Evidence. Journals recovered from Gregory Jennings' locked cabinet. Witness testimonies matched with financial records and coded logs. Implications. DA reopened 3 cold cases in 2 counties. FBI launched an interstate trafficking probe linked to Jennings' associates. Miles closed the file, the last one he'd write on the Jennings case. He stared out his office window. Justice this time had come late and at a terrible cost. But it had come. Ethan, Camille, and the others could finally begin to heal. And for the first time in a long time, the truth wasn't buried. 2 years later. The courthouse was quieter this time. No reporters, no cameras, just a few people in the gallery and a judge seated behind a polished desk. Detective Miles Carter, now grayer, a bit slower, but still sharp, sat quietly behind the prosecution table. Ethan Jennings walked into the courtroom in a clean prison-issue shirt, wrists chained in front of him, face calm. He looked thinner, more tired, but there was something in his eyes now. Not rage, not grief. Peace. The court was reviewing his sentence. After the human trafficking case was exposed, with multiple survivors identified and Gregory Jennings' crimes verified through journal entries and testimony, the DA had formally filed for Ethan's early release. They had argued successfully that Ethan's mental state was damaged by years of being lied to and emotionally manipulated. The real story wasn't that he had murdered a woman in cold blood. The real story was that he was a man pushed to the edge by a lifetime of silence and buried pain. The judge looked up from the documents. "Mr. Jennings," she began, "the court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances surrounding your case. You have served time, but more importantly, the truth of your family's history, the abuse, the cover-up, the crimes your mother allowed and your father committed, casts a new light on your actions." Ethan nodded quietly. "I am not saying you are innocent, but I believe you are no longer a threat to society. And I believe you deserve a second chance." She paused. "Effective immediately, you are hereby granted parole." Gasps filled the quiet courtroom, not of shock, but of relief. 2 months later, Ethan stood outside the gate of Maplewood Correctional Facility. The air was cool. The sky was bright. For the first time in years, he was no longer a prisoner. Camille waited by a car across the lot. She stepped out as he approached, unsure of what to say. They hadn't spoken face-to-face since the trial. Letters, yes, occasional calls, but not like this. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She held out the keys. "I figured you wouldn't want to take the bus." He chuckled lightly. "You figured right." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with things they didn't need to say anymore. "I'm